Yeah, I think this first point of creating space and be intentional and making a plan is essential. Um, we can't the big picture. Every time I've seen a succession transition go well, is the theme is always because someone with a lot of power and experience, typically the leading and now generation, steps back and says, I can keep doing this. I've got a track record of success. I am an entrepreneur. See the identity themes there? But they're
Mm-hmm.
willing to, I'm willing to sort of take a step back from meeting my identity needs and allow you to step into the space. And so there's a couple different ways that people make a plan. And I, come from a background in higher education, so I'm always thinking about a curriculum and measurable outcomes and how we can really help people feel like they're making progress toward an
Yep.
agreed upon goal, and being inclusive around that is really important. I know of a family that brings in national speakers, and they have a rich curriculum and they spend all kinds of resources on it, but you don't have to spend a lot of money on this.
No, you don't, Tom. In complete opposite of that, I've worked with a family for a while, and they did a family retreat last summer where they just had a cabin at Cedar Point, which is a local amusement park. And they had themselves, the owners, which is a husband and wife team, with 4 daughters, their husbands, and all their grandchildren. Now, their grandchildren were ranging from 3 to almost 14. And the way that they were trying to work on leadership and development of everyone was to introduce the concept of failure. And really just after lunch, we sat in a circle, everybody kind of sat in the living room, and the grandparents had that issue to talk about. And what they did is they talked about all of the things they failed at before they got to the business they're at. And they told a story that not even their kids have heard, which was their very first business as a married couple was a worm farm, and how they started by trying to sell live bait, and how the worms got out and all died and curled up and dried out. And the grandchildren from 3 to 14 thought that was a riot. I mean, they really thought it was funny. And it was nice to kind of break the tension around a subject. And then what was cool was then the second generation shared with their children things that they had done both in business and personal lives that just didn't work out. But then they also talked about the lessons they learned from it. And what was really neat was at the end, the kids started talking about what they have failed at and what that taught them. And really, as a family, they started to talk about, well, how do we put this into our daily lives? And one of the things they talked about was, how about at dinner time, instead of just asking what you did right that day, let's talk about what you learned from making a mistake, right? And so they're trying to integrate or trying to accept the fact that failure is part of life, and it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. So that didn't cost very much money at all.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ideas that we've talked about, and this ability to talk about failure shows sort of a healthy identity development. Is I'm not so wrapped up in you seeing me as a successful entrepreneur that I have to avoid talking about the times where I wasn't successful as an entrepreneur. So that's a way of contributing to a fully developed identity of the next gen as well. And you and I have spoken, and I'm just going to pick up the pace here a little bit so we stay on track, but you and I have spoken about the value of family charters, a values process in families, how families can articulate what their values are and teach them, and then intentional leadership skills developed that reinforce a culture and a value both in the family and in the business that people want to support. And I think one way that I saw some of this happening in a really rich way recently is a situation, very successful entrepreneur who did just what I said, step back and created space for the next gen, and was using words. So he had a great idea, probably going to make a lot of money, but it's entrepreneurial, so there's risk. And he did 2 things. He said, I want this to be we, not me. So
That's
hear the
impressive.
identity stuff there. This is about our family, not about me continuing to reinforce my identity as an entrepreneur. And I want this to be an educational learning process. So it's not just about how much money we make and how little time, but the fact that the next generation can have learning space in there. Now, we're developing the steps along the way, so there is the greatest chance of both that family harmony and the educational outcomes that lead to business success. And so some of my coaching with Dad is, your identity as entrepreneur, sometimes the next gen, even in a business setting, might need to hear the voice of their father. And let's talk about what that looks like and how do you read the room and respond that way. So that's just one example that, frankly, when he started to say, I want it to be we versus me, I was so inspired by that. We versus me, yeah.
That's awesome. And, I can't imagine, Tom, working with him, how much you had to talk to him about being flexible and patient in implementing that idea. So that's our next step that we're going to talk about, is learning how to be flexible and patient with one another.